Now, India's space agency has released some amazing footage of the way satellites are put up into space. A record 104 satellites went into orbit on Wednesday. The number broke the previous record that was held by Russia. Now, if we can see these pictures, it only took 30 minutes to eject them from orbit. There we go. The satellites are being rejected from the Indian-owned rocket. Now, there are 104 satellites, as I said, 103 are foreign-owned. One of them will be used by India. They'll be used to map traffic and, of course, keep an eye on the weather. Enjoy these pictures. Your headlines will be up next.
India now has launched 104 satellites on board a single rocket, setting what its space agency calls a new world record. Almost all the satellites are foreign-owned and will serve international customers. It's part of India's plan to gain a bigger chunk of the $300 billion global space industry. Ben Tornquist reports.
2, 1, 0, +1.
A countdown to an historic record. India's PSLV rocket carried 104 satellites into space, along with the pride of millions of Indians. In less than 10 minutes, all 101 foreign-owned satellites were released into space, each travelling at a whopping velocity of 27,000 kilometres per hour, or about 30 times the speed of an average passenger plane. But of the 104 satellites, only 3 are Indian. The chief of the Indian Space Agency says they're not in the game for setting records.
So it's not whether we are crossing somebody else, what they have put or what we have put as a record. It's primarily about improving our capability to maximize our returns.
India sold space for 600 kilos on its rocket for more than $100 million, making it one of the most commercially successful launches ever. The agency's relatively low prices attracted international customers to launch 75 satellites through it last year. It cost around 20 to 30% less than the Chinese launch satellites. India is considered new to the multi-billion-dollar satellite launcher market. But with this latest mission, it has surely set an enviable benchmark. India now plans to send a maiden voyage to Venus in a few years. Ben Tornquist, TRT World.
Now finally, India has successfully set a record by launching 104 satellites into orbit at the same time.
2, 1, 0, +1, 2, 3, 4.
Now the rocket carrying them took off from the southern spaceport of Saharikota. It held a 714 kilogram satellite and 103 nano satellites. Among their uses, the satellites will monitor roads and create maps for water distribution. Most of them are owned by the United States. Russia held the previous record by launching 37 satellites in 2014. Well, for more on this, TRT World's science reporter Surav Roy joins us now in the studio. It's quite a sizable jump from that Russian number to this latest launch by India. What does this mean for the Indian Space Agency?
It is indeed a huge accomplishment. But in terms of science, it is not just taking up 103 or 104 satellites up into space. It's also successfully deploying them in orbit, which means a lot of complicated math and a lot of complicated physics into it. And that by itself is a huge accomplishment, to have 103 satellites being deployed in formation, such that all of them, as you rightly said, are nanosatellites. All of them are flying together in a formation in unique orbits. That by itself is a huge accomplishment. The Indians are not looking at setting record. They're looking at maximizing their capacity, which means that they're looking at pushing the next frontier. What could be the next frontier for them?
What could be the next frontier for them? What are they looking at?
Well, they've already sent the world's cheapest yet the most successful Mars mission, known as Mangalyaan. They've sent a very successful mission to the moon called as Mangalyaan. They're now looking at trying out the GSLV, the Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle, in the months to come. They're looking at sending more missions to Mars, to Moon, as well as to Jupiter and Saturn as well. And if one has to go by what the space agency ISRO says, the Indian Space Agency, they're looking at 1 launch a month. Now that means a huge amount of science and technology research and development taking place within the agency.
And just how big an achievement is this? We've touched on the figures. Why exactly are they spending so much money, putting so much effort into this?
Because like I said earlier, it's not about the money. It's testing your capacity versus your knowledge of science. Now, we all know that there are many space nations who have the ability to send rockets as well as satellites into space, but ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, is by far the most successful space agency, given the fact that it hasn't had any major or any massive failures in the last 10 years. It has had some of its accomplishments, some of them minor, some of them major, but yeah, this is a huge accomplishment for them in the long run.
Okay, fascinating stuff. Saurav Roy, thank you very much.
And India's Space Research Organization said the rocket blasted off half an hour ago from the southern spaceport of Sriharikota. And the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle carries a 700-kilogram main satellite for Earth observation and 103 smaller nano satellites, which weigh a combined 660 kilograms. Nearly all of the nano satellites are from other countries, including Israel, Kazakhstan, and the Netherlands, Switzerland, and United Arab Emirates, and 96 are from the United States. If successful, India will set a world record as the first country to launch the most satellites in one go, surpassing Russia, which launched 39 satellites in a single mission in June 2014. And the business of putting commercial satellites into space for profit is growing, and India is competing with other international players for a greater share of that launch market, and is known for its low-cost space program. Last June, India set a national record after it successfully launched a rocket carrying 20 satellites, including 13 from the US. And in 2013, it sent an unmanned rocket to orbit Mars at a cost of just $70 million, compared with NASA's Maven Mars mission, which had a $670 million price tag.
Let's think about this a little bit more.
Okay, let's get to the top. You know, let's get to the topic. The three boys in the toy. We just want to talk about India breaking this. What, about 3 hours ago? Not even that, maybe. Breaking this world record. 104 satellites in one shot. Really, this agency is becoming a very serious player in the race.
Well, look, if we've seen anything that's come out of India over the last decade, 2 decades, we've seen it aggressively happen in tech markets, in other businesses, and this is another area that India is looking to lead on globally. Yes, it's broken the record, which I think the Russians held from 2012. 104, as you say, Aaron, satellites on this one rocket. Now, you know, the size of these things has changed drastically over the years. Great capability. 96 of them are from the US. Okay, so they're dealing with international markets here. But the question is, it's about capability. Now, we here in the UK are also building a great capability in satellite construction. We have a satellite catapult that the government funds, really world-leading in terms of how we develop technology here. The Indians are trying to play the race, the satellite space race, I think.
And they do it very, very. They can do it for very, very cheaply. But I've had lots of tweets this morning. A question you mentioned about the UK doing this. So here's the question: India has a space program. India has nuclear weapons. A third of Indians live on less than $1 a day. But if they've got a space program, they've got a nuclear program. Should the likes of UK, Australia, be giving India aid? You've got about 30 seconds.
Right. Well, the question isn't about where should the money be spent. Even in the UK, as we spend in the satellite industry, we have questions about should that money go into the NHS? Should it go into welfare reform? Should it go into other factors? I think the Indian government is looking at investing in innovation that will deliver for its economy and help that vast population to raise its standard of living. It's a macro conversation about policy and politics and where you place your bets. But I think, you know, good on the Indians for doing it. Okay. There are other countries also trying to achieve it as well.
Corvia Ranger, thank you very much indeed for talking to Aaron Hasselhoff. I know, I'm sorry, I had to get...
3, 2, 1, 0.
It's a boost for India's space program. At the tip of this rocket, there are 104 satellites. It's the biggest number ever carried by a single launch.
The science and technology has been always at the center focus since India got independence in 47. So India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru had put space, atomic energy and other issues as a key focus area.
This is the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. It holds one big satellite which will be used to observe the Earth. The rocket's also carrying 103 much smaller satellites. 96 of them are from the US. But India's Space Administration, known as ISRO, says it's not dependent on US business.
In this launch itself, India has launched a satellite right from Switzerland to Kazakhstan to Israel to UAE and many other countries. So there are many countries which are knocking on the door of ISRO to launch their satellites.
India's launch program is famously low cost. It sent an unmanned rocket to orbit Mars in 2013 for just $73 million. NASA's Mars mission cost $671 million. India is campaigning hard to get a bigger share of the world's commercial satellite market, and being cheaper is likely to help. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said a rocket that launched 4 foreign satellites in 2014 cost less to make than a Hollywood blockbuster movie. Rob Matheson, Al Jazeera.